It is 1 p.m. in New York, 6 p.m. in London, and 1 a.m. in Hong Kong. I'm Vonnie Quinn. Welcome to Bloomberg Markets. Here are the top stories we're following on the Bloomberg and from around the world. Day 2 of questioning for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett today, and the tone is decidedly sharper as Democratic senators have some time. We'll speak with Elizabeth Wydra of the Constitutional Accountability Center. Apple just kicking off its latest product event. We're anticipating the first look at the company's next generation phone, likely called the iPhone 12. And in a few moments, our own Francine Lacroix will be hosting a post-COVID-19 IMF panel, including the Managing Director, Kristalina Georgieva, BlackRock Chairman and CEO Larry Fink, and former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney. Some of that conversation live. Right now, let's get a quick check of where we stand markets-wise. It's been a bit of a bifurcated market through the session, with the Nasdaq still positive, up about 16 points. The Dow and the S&P down about 1/3% each. The British pound dropping just a bit as, well, I don't want to say D-Day, but October 15th approaches, let's put it that way. Doesn't look like that's going to mean much for any trade deal. The British pound trading at 129.55 versus the US dollar. And crude back above $40 a barrel, stuck in that range, up about $1. The confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett are underway in Washington. Let's bring in Elizabeth Wydra, president of the Constitutional Accountability Center, who has been following all of the questioning. Elizabeth, what stuck out to you today that you may not have thought of in Amy Coney Barrett's answering of some of the questions?
Well, I think her answers were sort of what we expect from a nominee, trying to avoid getting on specifics, trying to say that there's a difference between her personal views and what she would do on the bench. But I think, the questioning that was going on just before this moment with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, the Democrat from Rhode Island, really brings home the point of what's been going on this morning. The Republican Party platform and the Republican senators on the Senate Judiciary Committee and President Donald Trump have been working tirelessly, putting political capital and tons of money into getting a Supreme Court nominee who will overturn Roe versus Wade, strike down the Affordable Care Act, and risk the marriage equality rights that LGBTQ Americans have fought so hard to achieve. And so it's a little bit silly to have this hearing this morning where the Republican senators in their soft questioning of Amy Coney Barrett and Amy Coney Barrett in her answers back are trying to say that they don't know how she'll vote on these crucial questions, but they've fought so hard to get a nominee who would do exactly those things. And President Trump made promises on the campaign trail and after he got into the White House that he would indeed put people on the Supreme Court who would strike down Roe and the ACA. So it's a little bit of that traditional parlor game, but as the questions today show, the stakes could not be higher, especially in this time of the pandemic.
Well, you at the CAC have looked at her record on the 7th Circuit and found that in her judgments, as you say, she's been an erratic originalist. So absolutely not somebody that you can decide in advance how they're going to judge. Would you give us maybe a bit more of an explanation as to what you mean? She did say she wasn't going to be Justice Scalia.
Yes, she said that she, certainly takes her philosophy to be similar to that of Justice Scalia. And what we at Constitutional Accountability Center mean when we say that she is an erratic originalist is that, originalists claim to follow the text and history of the Constitution, but far too often we see with conservative originalists that they privilege the parts of the Constitution that existed in the 18th century and overlook the transformative amendments to the Constitution after the Civil War, for example, that promised equality for all, that ensured the right to vote and the right to live free from racial discrimination, gender discrimination, and so on. And so what we've seen when we look at her record is that she doesn't appear to appreciate the whole Constitution, including these amendments that guarantee equal citizenship stature for women, for LGBTQ people, protections for immigrants, for workers, for people who are just really struggling to get by.
She did say that she is not hostile to the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, and later also said that's just not true to the suggestion that she might have an agenda there. Is it possible to not have an agenda, but also, be very clear in your thinking about what you might do if you were to become a Supreme Court Justice on the question of the ACA?
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to square those answers. She's been remarkably clear, actually, in her statements and writings before she got on the Seventh Circuit bench just a few years ago that she disagrees with the rulings by the Supreme Court upholding the Affordable Care Act. And again, it just, belies the efforts that the Republican Party, including the president, have put into getting a nominee who they explicitly say they want to overturn the ACA, that they're rushing through while the people are voting, that they don't think that she's going to overrule the ACA. So that's really, I get what she's saying, and she, of course, has an interest in appearing to be an impartial jurist, but everything that came before her nomination, everything that surrounds it, suggests that she is going to be a reliable vote to strike down the ACA. And that concerns, obviously, the Democratic senators. They've shown over and over the effects on real people that striking down the ACA would have. And if you look at the polls of the American people, it deeply concerns them, especially when we're in a time where you have people losing their jobs, potentially looking at losing their health care in the middle of a pandemic.
Now, she, is likely to get through, and it's not the first time that people have anticipated a justice would vote a certain way and been maybe disappointed or maybe happy that when they finally, acceded to the Supreme Court, they didn't vote the way you might have thought. That could happen here, couldn't it, Elizabeth?
I certainly hope that every justice who gets on the Supreme Court is going to be truly an impartial adjudicator of the law. But, what we've seen from the conservative legal movement, after Chief Justice John Roberts voted to uphold the ACA, are vows that they will never be fooled again. And so, with the nominees under President Trump, Justices Kavanaugh, Justice Gorsuch, we haven't seen any sort of liberal surprises from them. And certainly with the stakes as huge as they are with this seat, both for the right and for the left, as well as for the American people of all political stripes, I just find it hard to believe that they would take any chances. And especially when you look at her record, where she has been remarkably clear on how she feels about the Affordable Care Act, that she thinks the previous decisions were wrongly decided and were poorly reasoned. And when you look at her views on Roe, she thinks it's an erroneous decision. Those were her exact words. It's, hard to think that she's going to get on the Supreme Court and do anything other than has been promised.
I just want to point out two more things. At the CAC, you also looked at her record and found that time and again she's sided with corporate and employer interests, even when consumers and workers had the text of the law and the precedent on their side. But just on something else that she said today, she said that it's precedent that gives same-sex couples the right to marry, but she also said she wouldn't give any precedent a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Does that mean that she would just completely interpret a precedent differently or try to, overturn or go a different way than precedent if the opportunity arose?
So she has said that, she thinks that the duty of a justice is to follow their vision of the Constitution, even if it conflicts at times with precedent. And that's really the important difference between confirming someone to the role that she has now, which is a lower appellate court judge, a step below the Supreme Court, and being appointed to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is the one that sets precedent. They can overrule precedent. And so when we talk about issues like the Affordable Care Act and Roe, and then even beyond that to major civil rights issues, environmental protection, worker and consumer protection, these are all on the table. And so that's what I think is important about the Supreme Court. And when it comes to, big business interests versus the interests of everyday Americans, of course there are times when the law should show that the business interest should win if the law is truly on their side. But what we've seen with the conservative members of the Supreme Court is that they seem to put a thumb on the scale. So even if the law is arguably better on the sides of workers, consumers, then big businesses still overwhelmingly win more than they have throughout history, and that is deeply concerning.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. Wonderful conversation. That is Elizabeth Wydra there of the Constitutional Accountability Centre.